The butterfly effect. Can one small choice change your future? What if the biggest change in your life began with something so small you barely noticed it? A message you decided to send. A conversation you almost avoided. A different route to work. A decision to say yes instead of no. We often imagine that life changes because of major decisions. Choosing a career, moving to another city, ending a relationship. But sometimes, the consequences begin much earlier, with a tiny event that seemed completely insignificant. This is where the butterfly effect enters the picture. The term comes from chaos theory, a field of mathematics and science that studies systems whose behavior can be extremely sensitive to their starting conditions. The famous idea is often described like this. A butterfly flapping its wings in one part of the world could, in theory, contribute to a chain of atmospheric changes that eventually affects weather somewhere else. But here is the important part. The butterfly effect does not mean that a butterfly literally causes a hurricane. It means that in certain complex systems, a very small difference at the beginning can produce dramatically different results later. Imagine dropping two nearly identical balls down two paths. At first, they are separated by only a fraction of an inch. But as they continue moving, that tiny difference grows. Eventually, they may end up miles apart. That is the basic idea. Small differences, complex systems, unpredictable consequences. And this becomes fascinating when we look at our own lives. Imagine you wake up 5 minutes late. Normally, that sounds meaningless. But because you're late, you take a different route. On that route, you stop for coffee. While waiting, you meet someone you haven't seen in years. You start talking. That conversation leads to a job opportunity. 1 year later, your life looks completely different. Did being 5 minutes late create your future? Not necessarily. But that tiny event changed the sequence of events that followed. Now imagine something even simpler. You decide to answer a message instead of ignoring it. That conversation becomes a friendship. That friendship introduces you to someone else. That person recommends a book. The book changes the way you think. Your new way of thinking influences a decision. And that decision changes your career. Looking backward, you might say, it all started with one message. But you could never have predicted the entire chain. And this is where the butterfly effect becomes more than a scientific idea. It becomes a powerful way to think about human life. We live inside complex systems. Our relationships are complex. Our communities are complex. Our brains are complex. Society itself is incredibly complex. One small action can interact with thousands of other factors. Think about everyday behavior. You smile at a stranger. Maybe that person is having a terrible day. Your small gesture doesn't solve their problems, but it changes their mood for a moment. Later, they are more patient with someone else. That person responds differently to another person. You may never know where that chain ends. Or consider the opposite. A careless comment can take only 5 seconds to say, but someone might remember it for years. A teacher tells a student, "You're good at this." The student begins believing it. They practice more. They become confident. Years later, that confidence influences what career they choose. Again, we cannot say one sentence determined the entire future. But small moments can become part of much larger chains. And there is an important distinction here. The butterfly effect is not a magical theory saying that every tiny action will produce a huge consequence. It doesn't mean that every decision is secretly changing the world. And it certainly doesn't mean that everything that happens to us was caused by some tiny event in the past. The real lesson is about sensitivity and complexity. In a complex system, you often cannot know exactly how a small change will develop over time. And that should make us think differently about our choices. Sometimes we become obsessed with finding the perfect decision. But perhaps the more realistic question is, what direction does this choice put me in? Because your future is not built only by dramatic moments. It is also built through ordinary ones. The conversation you have, the habit you repeat, the person you decide to call, the opportunity you accept, the opportunity you reject, the 5 extra minutes you spend learning something, the 5 minutes you spend scrolling instead. None of these guarantees a particular future, but they can influence the path that leads there. And here's the paradox. We want to control our future, but the butterfly effect reminds us how difficult prediction can be. A tiny change can have consequences we never expected. Sometimes that is frightening, but it can also be empowering. Because if small actions can influence larger outcomes, then small actions matter. You don't always need to completely reinvent your life. Sometimes you need to change the next step. Read one page, make one phone call, apologize, ask one question, learn one new idea, have the conversation you've been avoiding. You cannot control every consequence. You cannot see every connection, but you can choose what you do next. So remember, the butterfly effect isn't really about butterflies. It's about how small differences can become enormous changes inside complex systems. And your life is one of those systems. So, the next time you think, it's just one small choice, stop for a moment. Because you don't know where that choice might lead. And maybe the most interesting question isn't whether one small choice can change your future. Maybe it's this: what small choice are you making today that your future self will remember? Question what you think you know.